Hey, this is Ashley, and I am really excited to be hosting this workshop. If you are anything like the small business owners in my life, you are tired, overwhelmed, and just straight up burnt out when it comes to social media management this far in the year. You probably feel like you're on an endless hamster wheel just trying to figure it out. This workshop is to help alleviate just that, being an informational pep talk for the upcoming year's social media. My goal is that you will leave here with number one, a forecast for the upcoming year's social media, two, tips to optimize your profile and increase engagement, three, social media platforms and their best use, and then four, strategies for effective content planning that will save you time and much needed sanity. So I'm going to do a brief introduction. My name is Ashley Abedini. I am the owner of Abedini social media agency. I am a Wichita native, a WSU business grad, and I have more than 10 years experience in social media management. I have to admit though, this is a pretty unlikely path. You see, I was never necessarily interested in social media when I was in high school. I was more so interested in psychology, what drives people. It wasn't until I took a consumer behavior elective in business school that I realized, marketing was just essentially using psychology to help businesses succeed. That's when I started taking social media a little more seriously. It shifted from being the superficial app to a real resource for community and genuine connections, and a way to see what people were saying about you and your competitors. When I graduated from WSU, I worked at a local nonprofit for a bit before deciding to get my feet wet in the startup industry in Austin, Texas, working at Facebook before I went to an advertising agency, before ultimately quitting and working for myself. It was in Austin that I decided to start my first food account, ATX Broke Girls. I was really able to tap into the growing community and the huge foodie community and get more than 15,000 followers within a few years. It was there that I learned so much about influencer marketing. And I learned that from the client end. I had restaurants reach out to me since the people that followed me were interested in restaurants. I would promote upcoming restaurant openings, new menu items, and I had a lot of sponsored ads. So that was really interesting. In the midst of COVID, though, I got homesick and I decided that it was a good time to move back. I kept hearing from my friends how, despite COVID going on, there was really this blossoming business community here and an entrepreneurial ecosystem that was forming. When I moved back, I decided to start a Wichita food account, ICT Broke Girls. I always joke that the pastime here is dining out. Everybody likes to eat food, everybody likes to check out the new restaurants. And I was really able to get in this community, getting almost 10,000 followers on Instagram and 3,000 on Facebook. I've been able to grow by really being intentional and engaging with the local community. I live in the Wichita location tags, in the local hashtags, in the local online communities. I know the Wichita digital community like the back of my hand. What have I learned? Well, I'll tell you a few things. Number one is that Wichita is a very supportive and collaborative community. There really has been a shift towards localism. I remember before I moved, probably like 8 years ago, how the rhetoric, how the language was just so much different from businesses. People didn't value buying local like they do now. I think consumers here, like they're starting to really get educated on why they maybe have to pay that premium and that extra to buy local. And they know, the positives behind that. And so that's been really interesting to see. I feel like it's a kind of a smaller community, but it is pretty tight and collaborative. The second thing I've learned is that, the trend of the Midwest being slow to trends is, or the stereotype of the Midwest being slow to trends is 100% real when it comes to social media. There has been a lot of growth in Wichita. I've seen a lot of businesses go on Instagram. A lot of businesses start really using videos. Some are starting some like longer form content, But overall, like this is still 100% the case. Like most businesses really aren't utilizing social media here like they should be. I think there are some exceptions I would like to mention because I see, for example, photography, there's a lot of salons and spas. So those are definitely more saturated than some fields. But like overall, I think there's huge opportunity. And I think there's a huge argument to be made that even in those more perceived saturated communities, that in comparable sized cities, like those fields and industries would still be saturated, if not more. So I still think that there's a huge advantage and opportunity even within those fields. So how can you leverage this opportunity if you are a small business owner? I think it's hard when everything is changing with social media, but there's some main trends and forecasts that I think it's really important to look at. And it's really important to work with the trends and not work against it. One of the main things I see in the upcoming year is to continue pushing authenticity over perfection. This year has proved that if anything, people are totally tired of the overly curated feed. It's important to have cohesion. You would like people to know when they're looking at a picture that you have because of this specific editing. You want it to look similar, but you don't have to overly worry anymore. That actually can work against you. There is something also very valuable as a viewer in watching the honest process of a business owner, not necessarily seeing all the successes. People kind of want to see the failures too. Like there's something really captivating about seeing the messy middle. And think about it more like where we were just seeing the final hairstyle look. Now we're looking at the hairstyle routine. People want to know what it took to get that final image. Instead of focusing on the perfect client, like what did it take to get there? The next trend I see is short form video. We've seen that this has been very popular. We've seen the rise of Instagram Reels. I've personally have been able to grow so much on my account because I've really been upping the video content that I've been posting. And I think it's a really interesting trend because all the platforms are now adapting to that. Even Pinterest has an option for short-term video that's very similar, kind of like to TikTok. So it's something to like just to get to be realistic with, and like the trend is not going away. And I understand the apprehension to video. Like I was there not long ago at all, but I had to be honest with myself. Like this isn't going away anytime soon. I might as well learn the skills. And luckily with video, with Reels, again, people don't want an overly curated news feed, right? So you can totally do great video, good visually appealing, Reels without being a videographer. It can be something that you learn from apps like CapCut and Splice. I really like Splice. CapCut is like a more popular app, but it's something that I devoted maybe 1 or 2 months to and just really honing that skill. And now I'm able to create content fairly fast from that. And, I find that videos, I try to strive for 75% videos. That has been kind of like the magic ratio for me. So that's what I suggest. And if you are going to do photos, it's worth maybe doing one photo. But I have found that typically people react better when you do a carousel. So that's something to consider. And the next trend I see is the rise of the micro influencers and influencers. People are really starting to value influencers, I think, more than digital ads. When someone talks about a product being well or being good, it's more beneficial than the company talking about it itself. Like testimonials usually rule, right? So people are going to be putting more effort into that. Again, Wichita is pretty slow to this trend. I think the Midwest in general kind of has this perspective of like, gee willy, like, aw shucks, right? We're very modest. And it's kind of goes against this maybe influencer. We don't like to identify. But it's a lot more practical than I think a lot of people think. For example, local restaurant owners, how that has shifted. You can think about it here in Wichita in terms of food as, Denise Neal has always been like the OG. Denise Neal from the Wichita Eagle has been like in terms of traditional media. And at one point in time when a restaurant opened, all they would do is reach out to Denise because she was the only writer. And now, because of social media, there's a lot more food people. There's prominent people on social media that, people know about the restaurant opening just because of that. They don't have to necessarily go through traditional media anymore, and that has shifted. Like two accounts I can think of is Jeremy with Fert the Foodie, and then Eddie with Wichita by EB. Like they're always covering the newest restaurant openings because they have those connections because of the influencer marketing that's kind of underlying that. So consistently posting or thinking about micro influencers is definitely something to think about. There's something more pure about someone talking about how a product has changed their life over a product that is making a claim about how it will change your life. Before spending a lot of money for a product or service, consider utilizing influencer marketing. So the last trend that I see is originality and expertise over trends. I'm constantly bombarded with posts like, trending audio to use, trending songs. And I think there's nothing wrong with that on getting on a trend, but it's going to be very hard to grow sustainably just going on those trends. It needs to be more about originality, because I think those kind of things are like what the trending music is very low hanging fruit in 2023. And I think that's good to keep in mind. Think less dance moves and more just a business owner authentically talking to you in the camera. It doesn't have to be a fancy backdrop, just someone talking and proving to you that they know their information. Because I think it's important to think, if I jump on this trend and like, let's say that I go viral, like that's a great thing. But in reality, like, is it? If people are going to be following you and they followed you because maybe they thought you did a funny take on a trend, like they thought you were really funny, but that had nothing to do with the actual content that you post. So think about that, because that could actually hurt your engagement if more people follow you and they're not actually going to be engaging with you at all and they're not interested in what you have to say. So I am now going to cover tips to increase engagement and optimize profile. So the first one is to have a very simple and direct bio. We need to be reminded that we think very quickly when we look, we make judgments very quickly. We aren't reading a lot of content to gather an opinion. And so people are often looking at your profile very quickly and they're deciding if they want to look on it any longer. So like, just make sure the most important descriptive words are at the top. I think it's great to describe yourself and try to get a sense of who you are, but just make sure those words don't overshadow kind of what you offer. Things like Aquarius, like, Enneagrams, like that's great, but like that might not be relevant. I think the second one is that I need to, bring home is consistency is usually better than anything else, right? Going viral again is glamorized and that is great, but like what really drives a lot of times useful engagement, relevant engagement is that consistency. People ask me often how much they realistically need to post to be able to grow. And I think it's hard to say, like, I don't want to say an exact number. I try to shoot for 4 times a week. I think that's a good sweet spot. But I think being consistent is just more important than anything. Because if you post 6 times one week and then like the next week you don't post at all or one time, that's going to confuse the algorithm. You want to be showing up consistently, having the algorithm know that you're going to be cranking out content on a regular basis. I think it's also good to think about posting at a certain time consistently. I don't want you to not post because it's not going to be at the right time. Like if you come up with content at 8 o'clock and you typically post at 7, like post, right? Post is better than not posting, but try to make it intentional and try to post at the same time. For example, you can do some content for like a month at 9 a.m. and then for the next month for maybe 4 or 5 p.m., something like that, and test it and just see how people are engaging. The third one is focus on your target market and really see where they're hanging out and be sure to engage within that. For example, I find that the majority of my audience is young females. And so I'm not just interacting with other food bloggers and their audiences, right? Because those are similar. I'm also interacting with salons, with estheticians, with people that have a very like young female audience. And that's how I have found a lot of success. I look and see who they're following, who's engaging with them. And, if you are a local business really wanting to be a local thought leader, a local expert, engage in those local hashtags, engage in those location tags, engage with like-minded people in the area. And that really helps show prominence. So next is to provide value to your followers. Be sure to provide what people are wanting. Maybe ask questions, maybe ask in your Instagram story, in a survey, what are people wanting to see? I think it's really important to make sure that, we're providing content that is useful. It's not just content that we hope they like, right? Like we know for a fact that that's what they're interested in. Next one is think of social media as a two-way street to gain as much insight about your followers. And to kind of go to the last point, like what better way to gain information than to create a survey? There's free sites like surveyplanet.com where you can ask people questions, ask your followers. And it's a good way to help people feel needed, feel like they're heard. People want to be asked if they're enjoying their experience. And so it could be a good way, for example, to look back. Who are the first people that are following you? Go way back into your following list and maybe reach out to those people, the OGs who've been supporting you for a while, because they probably have opinions, right? If the people that are constantly engaging with you, like they probably have thoughts and maybe ideas for things you can post about. And the next thing is to research competition and find gaps and don't be afraid to leverage. I found before I even started a food account, I looked around and tried to get a sense of like what other food accounts in Wichita were talking about. And I noticed a trend that all food accounts here, at least at the time, were very straightforward. They were very informational, kind of like to the point, but none of them showed their face. None of them really gave too much details about their life at all. It wasn't personal. It was just very informational. And I saw a gap. I saw, maybe people were interested in learning more about someone and kind of the storytelling more behind it. And so I leveraged that a little bit. I really play up like my witty sense of humor. I tell kind of like almost intimate personal stories on my Instagram stories. So it is a food account, but people really, I think, have a sense of who I am. Study your competition and don't be afraid to leverage any space missing in the field. I am now going to go through the social media platforms and the best ways to optimize them for the next year. Okay, Facebook. I feel like this is the dreaded platform because a lot of people have been seeing a decrease sometimes in the business features. Like I notice it's hard. It's been getting harder and harder almost for organic engagement. But the thing is, it's important to remind ourselves that like Facebook is the most prominent app. There's 2.93 billion active users in 2022, so it's not going away. I think it's maybe good to think about it and shift it more as it's an app for friends and family. People are getting updated on people around them, what's going on in their lives. People are sharing recommendations to their friends and family. Like that's kind of where it's at. It's at the core a community. And, what are the community features? I personally have found a lot of value with Facebook groups. Local Facebook groups as a local business owner is like super valuable. You can search, get a sense of what people are saying about you, your competition, ask questions. I have found a lot of insight specifically in the Wichita Food and Booze Facebook group. And it seems kind of like a silly group at first. Like people go on there to just, see people's wild opinions. But I've been able to get a good amount of insight from a client, Reverie Roasters, when I was doing their social. I searched their name. I think this was before I actually started doing their social, just to see what people were saying. And I noticed that, people were really honing in on the pastries. Everybody loved the pastries. And when asked about the coffee, everybody had glowing, amazing reviews about the coffee. But, I felt like that was an opportunity because I noticed, people in Wichita really don't talk about coffee. There's not really a coffee scene. And so I saw there was an opportunity for education. So always be searching. I think the Facebook groups are a really good tap on the community around you. And remember that video content will continue to reign supreme on this app as well. The Instagram stories are transferable to Facebook stories. And again, that's a great way to do storytelling. It's really just a great way to get in front of your audience. And Facebook Live has been a great tool, and it will continue to be a great tool. You can always think about repurposing too. So if you go live, you can repurpose it later in a post, and then you can cut that down if you want to do an Instagram reel, TikTok, something like that. So next is Instagram. So we know that Instagram is where people follow brands and businesses. It's aspirational and a motivational app. It's very popular and it's definitely not going anywhere. Reels, like I had mentioned previously, are definitely staying around and growing. I recommend getting on Reels if you haven't already been. If you are on it, definitely rev up. Videos I have just found a great feature, and they're definitely pushing that out. The people that use that the most, more people see their stuff. And the great thing about this app is I feel like it's a very more direct way to get to know your audience. I have found that on Facebook, there's a lot more people that make their profile private. And so you're not really able to communicate with them as directly. On Instagram, even if someone is private completely, you can DM them and there's a chance they'll see your message. And so I feel like I just know my Instagram audience a little more than the other platforms. And this is really just a great way to emphasize your brand's storytelling. I really encourage you to implement stories. Stories are kind of like the behind the scenes, like what's going on behind the company culture. It gives you an inside look. And that really helps. We know more and more people are wanting to know who's behind the business. What's it like on an everyday thing, right? Like we don't want to know just the finished fancy product that we post. So doing an Instagram story is a great way to do that. And I recommend doing that as much as you realistically can throughout the day. Don't kill yourself to make 100 stories a day. I think maybe doing 1 or 2 a day is a good goal. When anything kind of pops up, and just trying to make effort to be posting. I think it's important to do the stories to kind of re-engage your current audience. It doesn't necessarily attract new people, but it helps the people that are following you to make sure they see your stuff. Because sometimes I think we're so worried about getting new followers that we almost ruin getting new followers because we hurt our engagement score. So the next app is TikTok. It's been interesting because I've seen when restaurants specifically open, a lot of them are starting on TikTok now, even though very few restaurants are on there. So there is a market advantage for being one of the first early adapters. And it's interesting that there are, I think, so few on TikTok. But it's an educational and entertaining app. I think a lot of times we see it as it's for Gen Z or it's just for teens dancing, right? But it can be a lot more nuanced than that. I've noticed personally fields that I would have never thought, mental health and therapists, a lot of them are doing really well on TikTok. They're able to talk to the camera for a little bit of time and just kind of talk directly and educate people. And that's kind of how we take in information now. TikTok, it recently surpassed Netflix, which I thought was very interesting. It just kind of goes to show you how we're more prone to short attention spans and kind of how our mind's working. It's interesting because you now can make up to 10-minute videos. So it doesn't have to be so short, and you can be a little more educational. And a lot of creators, have a lot of success with doing long form video, doing several series even. There is a little bit of some uncertainty. There's certain states that are trying to make it illegal. If it's a federal employee, there's some nuance there, but it's something I think is maybe potentially worth looking into. And, if God forbid, if TikTok goes away, like the skills that you're putting into it in terms of creating video would still be relevant. So the next one is YouTube. When we talk about social media, we're often talking about like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, places that when you post, like people probably are only going to see it for an hour or so at the best. YouTube is a lot different. It's a lot more longer lasting and it's searchable. It's a lot more like evergreen type content that's relevant for a while. Um, there is going to be a growth with short form videos. YouTube Shorts is something that you might want to potentially look into. They're really trying to push that. They're trying to get TikTok creators and Instagram creators to go on YouTube Shorts. I think there's an advantage to be on it if you are one of the first. It's definitely a platform that I would have you consider if you have a lot of information. If, potentially you could talk for a long period of time and you feel comfortable, like maybe this is an app for you. And then also Pinterest. This is a pretty helpful app depending on your demographic. If you have predominantly female audience, if you have a huge blog or a lot of online content that you want to repurpose and you want to make sure it gets to people, this is a great way to do that. If you have a lot of education on your product, this is great. And if you have a product or service that can really stand alone on images and you don't need like a huge caption, I have found that that can be good. So Pinterest might, it might be worth looking into, maybe seeing how other people are doing it. Because you can get a lot of web traffic and help SEO with that. And they are also introducing short form videos, which I think is interesting. So definitely a relevant app. The last one is Reddit. And I think this one is interesting because it's not really seen as a social media app, but it's more so a really good tool to gather information and to be great market research. I have found a lot of information on, not specifically myself because I don't have a huge like name recognition, but I've found a lot of information about my competitors. Like, what are people liking about my competitors? What are they not? What are people searching for? It's known or dubbed as like the front page of the internet. And in a way, it's kind of like the front page of Wichita. People are saying a lot of things when they come to move. A lot of people that are new here post on there. So it's maybe not an app to spend a lot of time on, but it's not worth it's maybe worth just searching your name or your business to get ideas. So now I'm going to talk about content creation tips. I think sometimes that's the most frustrating thing for a lot of people is this idea that we always have to be posting and how can we do that and keep our sanity, right? And for me, I try to batch content, which just means I try to make it ahead of time and schedule it out. That has been like the best for me. I have felt the best with that. And it also helps prepare me. I try to batch for a month at a time if possible, but it's what you just can really realistically do. And I try to do it where when I'm feeling organized, I will like pull up a document and write out the captions. But then the next day I'll write the video or create the videos or post to go with that. I find that it helps because to write caption and then to create video, like you do have to multitask and that can be hard to do in the same day. So I try to mix that up. And I also try to have a little note app throughout the month where I jot down details, thoughts, really anything for the next month. Like I try to keep an ongoing note, and that just really helps me that at the end of the month when I have time, I can look at it and kind of make sense of it, structure it out a little bit. And that's how I do it. I try to schedule out as much content for my clients as possible. And I do that in Facebook if it's for Facebook and Instagram. And I use later.com if it's for other apps. And that has really helped me. I don't have to always worry, oh, I need to post right now, like knowing it's going out. And I think also it's important to think about like cross-channel marketing since we're doing video. When we start with long form video, then we can break that down. So maybe have a plan for that, depending on if you have several platforms. Like if you have a YouTube and a Facebook and an Instagram, maybe start with that long form content on YouTube and then break that down into several reels. So this is the last of the presentation, but I just wanted to give a few examples of accounts that I think are doing really great things. I think it's always great to have that kind of motivation, look up to other accounts for tips. The first one is Leslie Coffee. It's a local coffee shop in Delano, and I think more than anything, they just do a really good job of feeling like they're involved, like being the heart of the business. You know, my worst nightmare as a social media manager is sounding like I'm a social media manager when I'm doing my clients' content. Like, I want to sound like I work there, like I'm behind the counter, I know exactly what's going on. And they definitely do a good job with this. So the next one is Body Bar Pilates. It's a Pilates studios that recently came to town not long ago, and they've just done a really good job at creating buzz and promotion. You know, they feature a lot of their clients, client wins, and they get a lot of shares. They also do a really good job of doing videos of the classes, so you have a good sense of like what to prepare for. And so although I've never been there, I really have a good sense of what it's like. Love of Character. This is an adorable little stationery store. I think they do a really good job of like just having the pulse of what their customers want. You know, they're asking questions. I remember once they asked a question on what their customers wanted to see, and within a few weeks they posted about how they had it in the store. And so they just really seem like they know their customers at the forefront. And the last one is Wichita Moms. You know, this is a great community that is consistently just cranking out content that is relevant to the Wichita mom. It has kind of like a funny sense of humor that is really relevant, like things to do as a mom, as a family. And I just noticed there's really good engagement and really tapping into who their target market is. Thank you for watching, and be sure to stay tuned for upcoming social media strategy and tips.